Has this ever happened to you? You find yourself drawn to someone not by their boisterous pronouncements or their desperate attempts at charm, but by an almost imperceptible hum of self-possession. It's a quiet magnetism, a profound stillness that speaks volumes without uttering a single word. This phenomenon, often misunderstood in a world obsessed with performative communication, taps into a primal fascination, revealing a truth about desire that runs deeper than superficial interaction. We often believe that to be seen, to be desired, we must constantly project, constantly articulate. Yet, the deepest connections, the most resonant attractions, frequently blossom in the fertile ground of unspoken understanding, hinting at a hidden power within those who embody quiet strength. This is not about being aloof or distant. It is about cultivating an inner world so rich and self-sufficient that its very existence becomes an invitation, a silent declaration of worth that captivates and enthralls. Across the sprawling, sun-drenched plains of a forgotten kingdom lived Elara, a woman whose beauty was not of the kind that shrieked for attention, but rather whispered of ancient stone and deep rivers. Her eyes held the quiet wisdom of centuries, and her smile, though rare, could thaw the most hardened heart. From birth, Elara was marked by a peculiar silence, not a physical inability to speak, but a profound disinclination. Her words were precious jewels, only offered when absolutely necessary, and then with a clarity and weight that few could match. This silence, however, was not empty. It was a vessel brimming with observation, with empathy, with an understanding of the world that far surpassed her years. As a young girl, Elara found herself an enigma in her village. Other children chased butterflies with boisterous shouts, their laughter echoing across the fields. Elara, however, would sit by the river, her fingers tracing patterns in the sand, her gaze fixed on the endless flow of water. Her peers, accustomed to the immediate gratification of verbal interaction, often mistook her stillness for disinterest or, worse, arrogance. They would try to draw her out, their questions like pebbles thrown into a deep well, only to be met with a gentle, yet unwavering quietude. This lack of response often frustrated them, leading to whispers and exclusion. Elara, in turn, learned to find solace in her own company, in the intricate tapestry of her thoughts, and in the profound connection she felt to the natural world around her. She was a silent observer of humanity, absorbing the nuances of their interactions, the unspoken anxieties, and the hidden desires that pulsed beneath the surface of their everyday lives. Her silence became her canvas, allowing her to paint vivid mental portraits of the souls around her, understanding their motivations and their fears with an intuitive depth that defied explanation. As Elara grew, this inner world deepened, becoming a sanctuary where she nurtured a profound sense of self. She spent hours in the village library, not speaking to the librarian, but simply absorbing the ancient texts, her mind a sponge for knowledge. She learned to mend broken pottery with an artist's touch, to weave intricate tapestries that depicted stories only she could see, and to heal minor ailments with herbs gathered from the forest's edge. Her hands spoke where her voice did not, each movement precise, purposeful, imbued with a quiet grace that drew the eye. Yet, the pain of misunderstanding lingered. She witnessed the easy camaraderie of others, the effortless exchange of words that built friendships and ignited romances. She saw how people yearned for validation, for acknowledgement, and how they often sought it through constant verbal affirmation. Her silence, in this context, was perceived not as strength, but as a void. Many men, initially drawn to her enigmatic beauty, quickly retreated when confronted with her quietude. They expected the usual banter, the playful flirtation, the verbal dance that signaled interest. When met with her serene gaze and gentle, almost imperceptible nods, they felt disarmed, uncertain, and ultimately rejected. Some grew irritated, interpreting her silence as a challenge, an unwillingness to engage. They projected their own insecurities onto her, seeing their attempts at conversation swallowed by an unfathomable depth. One such suitor, a flamboyant merchant named Kale, accustomed to charming women with his silver tongue, found himself utterly disarmed by Elara. He would regale her with tales of his travels, his voice booming with self-importance, but Elara would merely listen, her expression unreadable. He tried wit, flattery, even anger, but her quiet presence remained undisturbed, like a mountain unmoved by a storm. Frustrated, Kale finally exploded. "Why do you not speak, woman? Are you too proud? Too aloof for the likes of me?" Elara simply met his gaze, her eyes holding a gentle pity. She did not need to articulate the chasm between their worlds. Her unwavering gaze conveyed it perfectly. Kale, for the first time in his life, felt truly seen, not for the persona he presented, but for the shallow emptiness beneath. He fled, his ego bruised, leaving behind a silence far more profound than Elara's. This constant projection from others, this misinterpretation of her nature, could have easily withered Elara's spirit. Many would have succumbed to the pressure, forcing themselves to conform, to speak when they had nothing to say, to perform for validation. But Elara possessed an unshakable inner compass. She understood that her worth was not contingent on external approval or the cacophony of words. Her strength lay in her unwavering connection to her authentic self, to the profound wellspring of her being. She understood, perhaps instinctively, the Jungian concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny or suppress. While others tried to project their own desires and insecurities onto her silence, Elara had already embarked on her own individuation journey, integrating her own inner landscape. She recognized that the discomfort others felt in her presence was often a reflection of their own inability to sit with silence, their own fear of introspection. She was an anchor in a turbulent sea, and those who could not find their own footing felt swept away. One day, a young scholar named Lyra arrived in the village, seeking ancient texts. Lyra, herself a quiet soul, noticed Elara not for her silence, but for the profound tranquility that emanated from her. She observed how animals gravitated towards Elara, how even the most agitated villagers found a subtle calm in her presence. Lyra, unburdened by the need for superficial interaction, began to spend time with Elara, sitting in comfortable silence, their shared moments filled with a profound understanding that transcended words. They communicated through gestures, through shared glances, through the quiet rhythm of their breathing. Lyra, recognizing the wisdom in Elara's stillness, began to learn from her, not through instruction, but through osmosis. Elara taught her to observe the subtle shifts in the wind, to understand the language of the birds, to find strength in quiet contemplation. Lyra, in turn, offered Elara a companionship that required no pretense, no performance, just genuine presence. In this quiet connection, Elara found a profound echo of her own being, a mirror reflecting the strength and beauty of her authentic self. It was a testament to the power of pure being, of simply existing in one's truth, that drew another soul into her orbit, not through spoken words, but through the magnetic pull of her serene presence. The character of Elara embodies the archetype of the wise woman or the hermit, a figure who possesses profound inner wisdom and self-sufficiency, often found in solitude or quiet contemplation. Her journey is a testament to the process of individuation, as she steadfastly refuses to compromise her authentic self for external validation. The theme that resonates throughout her story is the profound power of silence and inner stillness in a world that often equates worth with vocal expression and constant activity. Elara's pain stemmed from the societal projection of inadequacy onto her unique way of being, a common experience for those who do not conform to extroverted norms. Her quietude was often perceived as a void, a lack, rather than a rich inner landscape. Yet, it was precisely this wellspring of self-possession that ultimately became her most alluring quality, drawing to her those capable of recognizing depth beyond superficiality. You, too, might find yourself in moments where your quiet nature is misunderstood, where the world demands a performance you are unwilling or unable to give. Remember, your worth is not dictated by the volume of your voice or the number of words you utter. Embrace your innate stillness, for within that silence lies a profound power, a magnetic pull that attracts genuine connection. Practice stoicism in the face of external pressures to conform. Let the opinions of others wash over you like water on a stone. Delve into your own shadow work, exploring the parts of yourself you might inadvertently hide, not for others, but for your own integration. When you cultivate a rich inner world, when you are comfortable in your own skin, your very presence becomes a statement, a silent declaration of confidence that needs no verbal embellishment. The desire you seek from others will not come from performing for their approval, but from radiating the calm assurance of a woman who knows her own worth, independent of external validation. Allow your being to speak for itself, for true desire is often captivated by the subtle hum of authenticity rather than the clamor of empty words. Imagine this. You are constantly striving, constantly performing, always trying to prove your worth through your achievements, your wit, your endless stream of accomplishments. Yet, despite all the outward success, there's a gnawing emptiness, a subtle fear that if you were to simply be, without all the effort, you might become invisible, undesirable. This pervasive fear of not being enough, of losing connection if you aren't actively doing or saying something, is a silent epidemic. It pushes us to overcompensate, to fill every silence with noise, every space with our presence, in the mistaken belief that constant projection equals inherent value. But what if the inverse were true? What if the most profound desire, the most enduring connection, arises not from a relentless pursuit of external validation, but from the quiet confidence of knowing your inherent worth, independent of any performance? In a city of towering ambition and relentless hustle, lived a woman named Anya, a celebrated architect whose designs graced the skylines of countless metropolises. Anya was, by all outward appearances, the epitome of success. Her mind was a steel trap, her ideas revolutionary, and her presentations, when she chose to deliver them, were masterpieces of logical persuasion. Yet, beneath the polished veneer, Anya carried a profound ache. Her childhood had been a relentless series of expectations, a constant pressure to achieve, to perform, to prove her intelligence and capability. Her parents, well-meaning but emotionally distant, had praised her accomplishments but rarely nurtured her emotional landscape. Love, she subconsciously learned, was a reward for effort, a consequence of being exceptional. This early conditioning manifested in a relentless drive, a fear that if she ever stopped striving, she would simply cease to exist in the eyes of others. This fear was her constant companion, whispering anxieties that she was only as good as her last achievement, only as worthy as her most recent accolade. Her relationships, particularly with men, mirrored this pattern. She attracted powerful, ambitious partners, men who appreciated her intellect and drive. But these relationships often felt like intellectual sparring matches, a constant exchange of ideas and achievements, lacking a deeper emotional intimacy. She found herself in a constant dance of proving her value, of demonstrating her intelligence and competence, even in her personal life. She would fill silences with witty anecdotes, offer unsolicited advice, and intellectualize every emotional moment, all in a desperate, unspoken bid to remain relevant, to remain desired. She believed that her sharp mind and eloquent arguments were her greatest assets in love, the very tools that secured her place in a man's world. One evening, at a high-profile industry gala, Anya found herself cornered by a renowned art critic, a man known for his incisive intellect and intimidating presence. She launched into a brilliant critique of the gala's chosen installation, her words flowing with precision and depth, expecting his usual intellectual parry. Instead, he simply listened, his gaze steady, his expression unreadable. Anya, unaccustomed to such passive reception, felt a flicker of unease. She continued, pushing harder, trying to provoke a response, a debate, anything that would confirm she was engaging him, that she was seen. But he merely offered a small, almost imperceptible nod when she paused, an acknowledgement that wasn't dismissive, nor was it effusive. It was simply present. Anya, feeling increasingly off balance, found herself running out of words. The silence stretched between them, not an awkward silence, but one thick with an unfamiliar stillness. For a woman who relied on her verbal prowess, this quietude was disorienting, even terrifying. In that space, for the first time, she felt exposed, stripped of her usual armor of intellect. This microclimax, this unexpected void in her usual conversational rhythm, forced her to confront the raw anxiety that pulsed beneath her polished exterior. It was the moment her carefully constructed facade began to crack, revealing the vulnerability she so desperately sought to conceal. She realized, with a jolt, that she had no idea how to simply be in that moment, without the constant need to prove, to explain, to articulate. The critic, sensing her internal shift, then spoke, not about art, but about the quality of the light in the room, the subtle hum of the crowd, the way a single note from the distant orchestra seemed to hang in the air. He wasn't seeking her intellectual agreement. He was inviting her to simply perceive, to feel, to exist in the moment without the need for analysis or performance. This encounter, seemingly insignificant on the surface, triggered a profound shift within Anya. It brought to the forefront her deeply ingrained pattern of seeking external validation through constant verbal output and intellectual achievement. She began to see how this constant need to prove herself was not only exhausting but also a barrier to genuine intimacy. Her intellect, while powerful, had become a shield, preventing her from connecting on a deeper, more vulnerable level. She started to observe others, not just their words, but their body language, the unspoken currents of emotion that flowed beneath the surface. She noticed how some individuals, without uttering a single profound statement, commanded a quiet respect, a subtle allure that transcended mere conversation. She recognized the echo of the anima in her own suppressed emotional landscape, the feminine principle within her that yearned for connection beyond the purely rational. Anya began to experiment with silence, much to the initial discomfort of her usual circle. In meetings, she would listen more, speak less, allowing space for others to contribute. In social settings, she would observe, her gaze attentive, her presence calm. The initial reactions were mixed. Some, accustomed to her vibrant intellectual contributions, found her new quietude unsettling, even disappointing. They projected their own need for constant intellectual stimulation onto her, mistaking her newfound stillness for disinterest or withdrawal. This was her true shadow work, facing the discomfort of her own ingrained patterns and the projections of others. She had to sit with the fear of being less than if she wasn't constantly performing. Yet, a curious thing began to happen. Colleagues started approaching her after meetings, seeking her quiet counsel, her thoughtful, unhurried insights. Friends found themselves confiding in her, drawn to the empathetic space her silence created. And then there was Leo. Leo was a sculptor, his hands speaking a language more eloquent than any words. He had been at the gala that evening and had observed Anya's interaction with the critic. Unlike others, he wasn't looking for intellectual fireworks. He was drawn to the subtle shift in her aura, the moment her guard had dropped, revealing a vulnerability that resonated deeply within him. He sought her out, not with questions or demands for conversation, but with shared moments of quiet observation. They would visit art galleries, lingering before sculptures. Their understanding communicated through shared gazes, subtle nods, and the comfortable rhythm of their shared breathing. He didn't need her to intellectualize her emotions. He simply allowed her to feel. In his presence, Anya found herself shedding the layers of expectation, the need to perform. She discovered the profound comfort of simply being, without the need for constant verbal affirmation. It was in these silences that a new kind of desire began to bloom between them, a desire born not of projected intellect or manufactured charm, but of a deep, resonant recognition of each other's authentic selves. She discovered that her true magnetic mystery lay not in what she said, but in the profound peace and self-acceptance she cultivated within. Anya's journey illustrates the compelling power of moving beyond the ego projection of constant performance and embracing the inherent worth that lies within. The central theme of her story is the transition from a life driven by external validation and the fear of inadequacy to one rooted in authentic self-acceptance and quiet confidence. Her initial pain stemmed from a childhood where love and acceptance were conditional upon achievement, leading her to believe that her value was tied to her output and her ability to articulate. This manifested in relationships where she felt compelled to constantly prove her intelligence, inadvertently creating barriers to true emotional intimacy. Consider your own life. Where do you feel compelled to constantly prove your worth through words, through achievements, through a tireless performance? Perhaps you fear that if you cease to explain, to analyze, to entertain, you will simply fade into the background, becoming undesirable or overlooked. Remember the wisdom of Seneca and Marcus Aurelius. True power comes from within, from the mastery of self, not from the desperate seeking of external approval. Begin your own journey of individuation by recognizing that your inherent value is not a commodity to be earned or proven, but a fundamental truth of your being. Practice applied psychology in your interactions by consciously choosing to listen more, to allow comfortable silences, and to observe without immediate judgment or the need to fill every void. This is not about becoming mute, but about cultivating a deeper presence, a stillness that allows genuine connection to flourish. When you release the need to constantly articulate your worth, when you truly embody a quiet confidence, you tap into a magnetic mystery. The desire you seek will not come from your words, but from the powerful, undeniable presence of a woman who knows herself, trusts herself, and radiates an authentic calm that transcends all superficial noise. Do you know how many women spend their lives chasing external validation, believing that their desirability, their very worth, is inextricably linked to the attention they receive, the compliments they garner, or the constant affirmation from others? It's a relentless pursuit, a Sisyphean task where the boulder of self-worth is perpetually pushed uphill, only to roll back down with every perceived slight or moment of neglect. This incessant need for external approval creates a fragile identity, constantly vulnerable to the whims and opinions of others. It strips away inner peace, replacing it with anxiety, a yearning for something that can never be truly satisfied from the outside. What if, instead, the most profound desire, the most lasting love, is cultivated not through frantic outward performance, but through a radical embrace of your own inner strength, a quiet knowing that frees you from the tyranny of needing to be seen, to be heard, to be validated by anyone else? Deep within a secluded monastery, nestled among mist-shrouded peaks, lived a woman known only as Sister Anya. From a young age, Anya had been drawn to the monastic life, seeking solace from a world that felt too loud, too demanding, too focused on superficiality. Her childhood had been marked by a poignant emptiness, a feeling of being constantly overlooked. Her parents, devout but emotionally reserved, had instilled in her a strong sense of duty and discipline, but little in the way of emotional mirroring. Anya learned early on that attention was a scarce resource, often given to those who demanded it most vocally or who achieved the most remarkable feats. This subtle, unacknowledged wound fostered within her a deep-seated fear of insignificance, a quiet terror that if she were not actively performing, she would simply vanish. In the monastery, she found a different kind of life, one steeped in silence and contemplation. Here, words were used sparingly, each utterance imbued with intention. The sisters communicated through shared tasks, through the gentle rhythm of their communal prayers, and through the profound unspoken understanding that blossomed from shared spiritual practice. Anya, however, initially brought her old patterns into this new existence. She would perform her duties with meticulous precision, hoping her diligence would be noticed, that her quiet service would somehow earn her the recognition she secretly craved. She would linger after communal meals, hoping for a word of praise from the Mother Superior, a subtle nod of approval from her peers. The quietude of the monastery, which was meant to foster inner peace, initially amplified her inner turmoil, making the echoes of her unfulfilled desires even louder. The very silence she sought became a mirror, reflecting her deepest fears of unworthiness. One long winter, a severe blizzard isolated the monastery for weeks. Supplies dwindled, and the usual channels of communication with the outside world were cut off. Panic began to ripple through the community, a subtle undercurrent of fear that threatened their carefully cultivated serenity. Anya, in her usual way, redoubled her efforts, taking on extra chores, tending to the infirm with tireless devotion. She believed that by being indispensable, by performing beyond expectation, she could quell her own anxieties and perhaps, finally, earn the unequivocal approval she longed for. She worked herself to the bone, her body aching, her mind racing with a desperate need to be seen as strong, as capable, as worthy. Yet, despite her efforts, the internal emptiness persisted, even intensified. She saw the other sisters, even in their fear, finding solace in quiet meditation, in shared moments of silent prayer, in the simple act of being present with their discomfort. They did not strive to do more. They simply were. This contrast struck Anya deeply. Her desperate striving was not bringing her peace, but exhaustion. She realized, with a sudden, painful clarity, that her relentless activity was merely a distraction from her own deep-seated fear of insignificance. It was a coping mechanism, a way to avoid the profound discomfort of simply existing without external validation. This was the mini-climax, the moment of raw, unvarnished self-recognition. One afternoon, during the deepest part of the winter, the Mother Superior, a woman whose presence radiated an almost ethereal calm, found Anya collapsed from exhaustion in the monastery's garden, trying to clear a path through the heavy snow. The Mother Superior did not offer words of praise or admonishment. She simply knelt beside Anya, her hand gently resting on Anya's forehead. In that touch, Anya felt an unexpected surge of warmth, a profound acceptance that bypassed all her defenses, all her desperate need to perform. The Mother Superior's gaze held a depth of understanding, a quiet recognition of Anya's internal struggle without the need for a single word to be exchanged. It was in that profound, wordless connection that Anya experienced a revelation. The Mother Superior wasn't validating her efforts. She was simply seeing her, acknowledging her pain, and offering unconditional presence. This was the main climax, the moment of profound realization. For Anya, it was a shattering of her lifelong paradigm. She saw that true worth was not earned through ceaseless striving, but was inherent, a quality that simply was. The Mother Superior embodied the wisdom of Epictetus, the understanding that true peace comes from focusing on what is within one's control, one's own inner state, rather than being tossed about by external circumstances or the opinions of others. From that day forward, Anya's relationship with silence, and with herself, transformed. She still performed her duties with diligence, but the desperate striving faded, replaced by a quiet joy in the act itself. She began to sit in meditation not to escape her fears, but to simply be with them, to acknowledge their presence without judgment. This was her profound shadow work, integrating the fear of insignificance into her consciousness, rather than letting it drive her actions unconsciously. She discovered that true peace came not from external validation, but from an internal reservoir of self-acceptance. She found herself less anxious, more present, and ironically, more deeply connected to the other sisters. Her presence, once marked by a subtle tension of striving, now exuded a serene strength. She no longer sought attention. It simply flowed towards her. The other sisters found themselves drawn to her quiet wisdom, her calm demeanor, her genuine empathy that needed no verbal expression. Even in the silence, her connection to her anima, her inner emotional and intuitive self, blossomed, allowing her to connect with others on a profoundly authentic level. She radiated a quiet confidence, a sense of deep inner peace that was more magnetic than any performance she could ever offer. Her transformation was a testament to the power of releasing the need for external validation, of embracing the profound magnetism that arises from simply existing in one's truth, in the profound stillness of self-acceptance. Sister Anya's journey culminates in a powerful testament to the process of individuation, where she moves from a state of external dependence to a profound inner liberation. Her story is a poignant exploration of trauma psychology, particularly the childhood wounds that lead to a relentless pursuit of external validation and a fragile sense of self-worth. The theme is a profound shift from seeking desirability through relentless performance to discovering a deeper, more enduring magnetism rooted in self-acceptance and inner peace. Her initial pain was the invisible wound of feeling overlooked, of believing that her worth was conditional upon her efforts and achievements. This created a cycle of striving that, despite outward success, left her feeling empty and perpetually anxious. Consider the constant hum of external expectations in your own life. How often do you feel compelled to speak, to perform, to prove yourself worthy of attention or affection? Perhaps you believe that your voice must always be heard, your presence always acknowledged, lest you become invisible or undesirable. This pervasive need for external validation is a cage, trapping you in a cycle of dependency. Draw inspiration from the wisdom of Carl Jung, who taught that true integration of the self, true individuation, involves facing the shadow parts of ourselves, our insecurities, our fears of inadequacy, and incorporating them into a whole, authentic being. You are not defined by the praise you receive or the attention you garner. Your worth is inherent, unshakable, and not contingent on external factors. Begin to cultivate a profound inner stillness. Practice the principles of Dale Carnegie, not for manipulating others, but for truly listening, for being genuinely interested in others without the need to immediately project yourself. Allow moments of silence in your interactions, not as a void, but as a space for genuine presence to emerge. When you release the desperate need for external validation, when you truly embrace the quiet strength of your authentic self, you tap into a wellspring of inner peace that is profoundly magnetic. The desire you seek will not come from proving your worth, but from radiating the serene power of a woman who is complete within herself, a woman who needs no words to declare her profound, undeniable value. Let go of the illusion that constant striving brings love. Instead, embrace the truth that stillness and self-acceptance cultivate a deep, resonant desirability that transcends all superficiality. This is your rebirth, the power of stillness, the message that your greatest magnetism lies within your peaceful, authentic self. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and share this video with others to spread positive values in life. Thank you for listening. The end.